Clare Coombes writes psychological thrillers and historical fiction. She is a Writing on the Wall Pulp Idol finalist, and she has an MA in writing from Liverpool John Moores University. Her debut novel, Definitions, will be launched on May the 28th. The book opens with the sudden disappearance of Gina Ellison, and her sister Charlie becomes desperate to explain the reason why she has vanished without a trace. With no close family and the police showing little interest, Charlie must track down Gina herself using her sister's custom definitions, random words and sentences summarising life events. And as Charlie begins to delve into the sinister world of the family Gina was about to marry into, Charlie's own dark secrets emerge, ones that threaten to overcome her at every turn. Can you escape your past and move on? How well do you really know your own family? And how far will they go to protect you? Definitions is a story about a family divided by secrets and a sister who won't give up. And this tense, thrilling novel is from writer Clare Coombes, who joins us on this edition of Arts Alive Books. Hi Clay, welcome to the show.
Thank you.
How are you doing?
Good, thank you very much.
You've got a day job as well that we share.
I work at Liverpool John Moores University as a press officer. So a lot of the time I am writing press releases. I'm also writing for the website. So different style of writing, but yeah.
Of course, yeah. It's interesting actually the number of writers we've had on the show who are ghosting, as it were. I mean, how rich and famous and successful do you have to be before you can give up the day job?
I think it's difficult with the debut novel because you're just getting out there. I'm with a brilliant publisher, Benny and Kearney, but they're quite small. So a lot of the marketing is slow but steady. The book is available on Amazon and Waterstones and different bookshops now. But it's a difficult process as an unknown writer to just come out and expect everybody to buy your book.
Yeah, yeah.
Even though the book is set in Liverpool and it's a very supportive city for writers, particularly through Mike Morris and Writing on the Wall, which is one of the reasons why I'm published today.
Yeah. So you're from Liverpool, as we mentioned, and you're one of, again, a number of writers that we know who've done the MA in creative writing at John Moores. Did you find that beneficial?
That was absolutely brilliant. I think there's now quite a few of us, I can't think of the figures, but I'd say every time the MA comes up, there's about 2 or 3 writers who are published from there. And it just gave me something like a creative sort of framework, because before then I'd done an English literature degree and I'd always loved reading, but it was difficult to kind of get my ideas down in paper, and also to have somebody look through and tell me where I was going wrong. I mean, in one of these examples, my friend who was on the MA went through my book before it went to the publisher, and I just called like what he did like the red pen of judgment, because basically it was lines of red pen all over my text. But there was really good things he did that he'd learned from the MA. For example, at one point he told me my book had more parties than Gatsby, so I had to cut a couple of parties out. Then he told me that one particular character was hissing all the way through a chapter. So it'd be she hissed and then she hissed again. Yeah. So it's things like that, and they sound quite simple, but when you're actually writing a book, you don't notice those things yourself. But in the MA, we had workshops where people would say, okay, this isn't going to work for this particular market, or the tutor said to me, this starts as an A to Z of an emotional abusive relationship. But my tutor, actually Jim Friel at the time, said it needs something more. It needs to have a bit more of a framework around it. And this is where the crime fiction came in. So if it wasn't for the MA at John Moores University, I might have just gone around with this dictionary of A to Zs and not actually had this whole psychological thriller angle.
So that's the angle of the book, that's the genre of the book, as you would describe it?
Yeah, the genre of the book is psychological thrillers. I sound a bit big-headed saying it's the Scouse Gone Girl, but it kind of does have that element to it. You have the clues, you have the sister desperate to track down what has happened in her family, but everybody's got dark secrets. So everybody's got something to hide. And I think that's what I really love in fiction, when people are not, morally good or, all bad. everyone's got reasons for what they've done, and it's a real sort of survival instinct. Like, what would you do to protect your family? And I think one of the important things in this book as well to look at is the impact of loss. So I kind of have taken from some life experiences of losing my mum at a young age, and I've always been interested in seeing how I could help people through fiction or put these emotions and feelings into fiction that, you know, I've carried around with me. So there is the element there of, you know, if you read the book, it's not me, it's not my life. You know, I think people get it wrong when they think it's always autobiographical. But there are the emotions in there, and there's the starting point of this loss. If everyone in the book has experienced a traumatic loss, which way do you go? Some people follow a completely destructive path, as you'll see with some of these characters, and some of them just take a long time to get back to normality.
Yeah.
So it does completely fascinate me.
Yeah, and it's interesting also that it's a sibling relationship rather than a kind of romantic relationship or...
Yeah, that was me wanting to do something a bit different, but also I thought it was an easy way to show the impact of loss if you take a family. So you could have members of the same family who, you know, go down completely different roads, but there's always something that binds them together. And I particularly wanted to use the idea of letters and words, and I always wanted to have it around a dictionary format. I suppose it's that whole play within a play, or, you know, not as Shakespeare would say, or novel within a novel. I wanted there to be something around the words that brought the sisters together and meant that no matter what happened in their lives, there was always a link between them, and they would always come back together. So it's not a romance in that sense. There is obviously love story elements in it, but I think you'd be disappointed if you were looking for a satisfactory love story within this piece.
And how did you find trying to depict the city that you were born and grew up in and
That was
know so well?
a lot of fun. That was absolutely brilliant. Yeah. For instance, you've got, even on the front cover of the book, I loved being able to have the liver bed on there and just being able to explore Liverpool in some of the scenes. I'm doing a book trailer with John Moore's drama and film studies students, and we were able to go all around the city and, you know, get the dock road and look at the skyline, and it was just amazing. Then I've even loved using like the humorous side of Liverpool and the characters and the things that we're known for and the particular peculiarities, and even things like the scouse brow is in there, because I do have characters who like love their fake tan and love their makeup and love their eyebrows.
You'll have to explain scouse brow
The
to
scouse
me.
brow. Well, when you read it, there's a little scene that talks about, and this isn't the traditional scouse brow, it's like Kit Kat chunky eyebrows, but that's not how it always looks. But I was just trying to explain how when it goes too far. So I was drawing on a few sorts of caricature elements for that. But, you know, if you see like the glamorous side of Liverpool and the girls who, you know, with the fake tan, not quite the rollers in the hair.
Yeah.
But I remember my publisher saying to me, because they're based down south, Benny and Kearney, well, I don't think a girl would be out at that time, a hair age in her pyjamas. And I was saying, well, you know, you do see that in Liverpool. So it's more like kind of looking at the funny side, but very much on the side of Liverpool. It's not negative.
So you've changed tack slightly now for your current novel, aren't you? The one you're writing. It's a kind of historical fiction.
Yeah, I thought it was, again, it's psychological impact, and it's looking, this one particularly, at two different characters who come together from opposite sides of Nazi Germany. And it does form a love story, but it's from someone who was in the Hitler Youth and somebody who was Jewish. And they've both had completely different upbringings based on, you know, how their country has treated them. And I put these fictional characters on a true story about a ship that was a propaganda exercise by the Nazis that went to Cuba but was sent back. And even America and Canada rejected this ship called the St. Louis. So I wanted to look at, okay, how do young people react? And a bit like on The Book Thief, when people make a stand in small ways, even with the stealing of books or, you know, hiding people and the things that you'll do, what makes people resist to periods in history like that? And what makes people come together and overcome prejudices? And that's particularly what it's not really got a title at the moment. I've done a couple of short stories, but it's young adult love story, but also it would be a book that would go across any age group to teach about tolerance.
Yeah, it's a big theme, isn't it? You're kind of dealing with, you know, big, difficult issues.
Yeah, I really love doing that though. I love, as I say, you know, a thread that would go through all my work is looking at psychological impacts, particularly on young people. And, you know, there's a recurring theme of loss, But I've always thought that there's a line from Alan Bennett's The History Boys when he says about reading and you find something and you thought it was particularly a thought to you or a way of feeling that you've got. And when you read in that particular section, it's as if a hand comes out and take yours. And I've always thought, well, if you're reading something and you get an emotional release from it, whatever loss you've suffered, that's helped me as a writer to, therapeutically writing, but also it could help people reading it while making it fun as well and having this sad side to a story, but also, there's going to be a lot of, nice parts in this Holocaust story, which sounds like, a bit like an oxymoron, it wouldn't be possible, but it's going to be counteracted by the fact that this is how people survive and this is how people get through difficult times.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's got quite a kind of didactic kind of moral element to it, as if you're using your fiction to try to teach people kind of, about the past or about relationships and so on. We mentioned earlier on, briefly, this novel Between Shades of Grey, which you said has been very influential on your ideas for the development of the novel.
Yeah, it was a writer called Rusa Shepherdis, and she's taken, it's not really spoken about as much. It's the Soviet deportations during World War II, and families were torn apart and sent to Siberia, and it could just be things like they were in power or they were librarians or teachers. And she really looks at this through the eyes of a young girl who uses art as a way of escaping. So if you were keeping a diary at these times, you could be put to death. It was very dangerous. So the author has got like a Lithuanian history, and it was the Baltic states that it happened to. And one of the things she says within the book is, at the end when she's doing the author's note, please research it and tell someone. And I thought that's actually what I want to do in my fiction.
Brilliant, yeah.
Yeah, and when you go through that book, it is heartbreaking, but the way people come together and the way that the family, again, it's a family story of survival. And I think one of the things she asks is, what is a life worth? And in one case, her brother's life is worth a pocket watch.
Okay, that's fascinating. So Claire will be joining us again in part 2 when she'll be talking about one of her other favourite authors, Marian Keyes. If you have any comments or suggestions for the show, please do contact us at artsalivebooks@baytvliverpool.com, and we look forward to hearing from you. Clare Coombes joins us again to talk about one of her favourite authors, Marian Keyes. Hi Claire, again. Marian Keyes?
Yeah, she's always been an influence for me. A lot of the time it's been because she was a pioneer of women's fiction, or chick lit, as the term can be. And also because she taught me that you can write in an accent. Because a lot of the time when she was first starting out, which is about 20 years ago now, she said she thought her books wouldn't be accessible and people wouldn't relate to them because she wrote basically in her own accent. And then she was proved wrong. So it's given me the confidence to kind of go through and think, well, I can include Liverpool sayings and terms in my novel, and I can include dialogue, and I can make people work it out if they don't already know it. And that's another skill in writing. So yeah, I really admire her.
Well, if you think about it, I mean, everybody writes in some kind of accent. Even whatever passes for normality must have got normal at some point.
Exactly, yeah. But I think sometimes there'll be words that I might, put in the novel that I've seen her doing, like in the Irish sense, and I thought, oh yeah, that actually does work. And also I admire her because of the issues that she deals with. Because despite the fact that some of her books will have, stars all over them, this charming man is actually one in particular that looks a bit more like a chick lit style. But with the pink writing, in fact, it's about domestic abuse, and it's quite violent in places, but it's just really good at, getting in and dealing with these issues and just making a really good piece of fiction. There's alcoholism in it and everything, and she just does a really good job, and I've always admired that. And I think even she herself would say that the covers don't necessarily represent who she is as a writer, but you've got to think about the PR and marketing side of writing as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you read The Woman Who Walked Into Doors by Roddy Doyle?
Roddy Doyle, yeah. I read that a long time ago, yeah.
Which again is a Dublin novel,
Yeah.
very kind of identifiable in terms of its language and its idioms, also dealing with quite difficult topics.
Yeah, and I remember reading, was it Paddy Clark?
Yeah.
I remember reading that. And I really enjoyed that. Yeah, and they were other books actually from a different side, because my mum always had so many books, particularly by Irish writers. So I would just pick them up when I was younger. And yeah, any kind of the Roddy Doyle side that would be challenging in a way where you go, oh, I know this language because I've been brought up with that sort of accent, but these were best-selling books as well. I like the honesty of writers like that, and I like the honesty of Marion Keyes, because obviously she's been through depression, anxiety, alcoholism. She's very open about it. And she uses that side of it in her book, in all her books, but at the same time, she'll be there to tell you it's not autobiographical, because everyone reading my book has been saying, oh, you know, there must be some autobiographical elements. And as I said before, it's a bit about loss, but you do, everything you've ever read, you absorb and put into this. And obviously she's a big reader as well.
Yeah.
So it's really interesting to see how she does her own life around all the other elements of things she hasn't lived and she might have just read in books or watched in films.
One of the interesting things I find about her is her style.
Yeah.
And the ability to write very, very accessibly. But not, and it must be a very difficult topic to do, or a thing to do, because if it wasn't, more people would be doing it. More people would be selling, you know, hundreds of thousands of copies like she is. So it's a real skill that she's got.
Yeah, I think she started off doing short stories, and then the publisher said to her, oh, we like these short stories, do you have a novel? And she lied and said yes. So then she had to write a novel. And knowing how long that takes, I think she just, you know, did it as quickly as she could. But then she said she spent longer on drafts since then, because, you know, as a novelist, you're drafting and redrafting, and your first draft, as a lot of famous writers say, is normally terrible. But I think that she never thought anyone would take her seriously as a writer. And then, you know, she was able to kind of put these dark subjects into pieces that people wouldn't expect. And it's not all like the kind of handbags and shopping that the chick lit genre will kind of have you believe.
That's where some of the most interesting stuff is done, I suppose.
Yeah.
I mean, you take a genre, the sex and shopping novels, and then you kind of you subvert it. I've got to say, I don't think her publishers are doing her any favours with those kind of covers, though.
I think I've seen she's really prolific on Twitter. She's absolutely brilliant on there, which is what I think is important for writers as well, social media. And she has said that she wouldn't necessarily choose a cover like that, but she does understand the marketing side. I've spoke to quite a few writers who've said that. Something really interesting she does in This Charming Man is she doesn't just do a first person, she does different voices. So you'll have one chapter in first person, one chapter in third, and I followed that as well in mine. And traditionally, you're kind of told that's not meant to work, but the voices in her novel, it's absolutely brilliant. It must have been quite hard to put together, but it makes it kind of like a believable story where you're looking at every different angle of domestic violence. But if you think about that cover, you just would not expect to have quite violent scenes, and you know, obviously the domestic violence scenes are quite prominent in it, and the upsetting scenes of a recovering alcoholic who's sliding back into that state, and you just wouldn't think from all the nice stars and pink on the front.
Yeah. Is that something that you aspire to do in your own fiction? Is to take the genre and maybe surprise people with the introduction of disparate, discordant elements?
Yeah, I mean, I've always loved writers like Sophie Kinsella and Kate Long, and alongside Marion Keyes, and just people who you pick up the book and you think, oh, what's this going to be about? And then you'll read and you'll think, oh, there's actually something really strong in here. And I've always wanted to do that. So I think after I've done the promotion on definitions, and then I've written the historical fiction, I would like to go back into that genre of kind of looking at how people live, family life, everyday life, dark issues, but written in a kind of very accessible, I mean, it's all accessible, but in the way that Marion Keyes does it. I think that'd be my next approach.
Has any of her stuff being filmed?
I think one was made into a film, but it wasn't, I don't think it was a big name or anything like that. I could be wrong, because it might have been a while ago. But it's kind of difficult. I was always told on my MA to to think of your story in terms of like the camera action, and in terms of how that would. So the very first chapter of my novel, which is what the Pulp Idol judges told me, was to kind of really go in and think of it in terms of like how it would be filmed. Not just because you want to sell your film rights in the future, but also because it helps the reader to really see what's going on. So a lot of my kidnap scenes in my novel are really thought out in terms of like how would a camera get to this.
That's interesting, isn't it? I mean,
Yeah.
it kind of, it's the exact opposite of a generation of, I guess, modernist writers who really wanted to kind of make it a difficult experience to read and to try to make the reader feel uncomfortable. Whereas with this, no matter how difficult the material, the reader is in some senses in command because they have a kind of proper perspective and they can...
Yeah. No, I think that's very important, and obviously I like that side, that accessibility side of being able to draw people in and give them something unexpected. Because with definitions, with my particular book, it's like you might not expect to see some of the things dealt with in terms of loss and some of the really harsh ways that people can go down in terms of drugs, and there's quite a lot in there that you think, oh, that's unexpected. But I didn't really want to kind of make it this easy book that people read and go, oh, after you experience grief, it's all easy and families all get on and things just go back to normal after a while. There's no set period on how long you can grieve for. And I think I wanted to show that in the novel.
The Scouse Marion Keyes, do you think that would be something to aspire to?
I'd like to say that, yeah. Sounding like I'm really full of myself saying a Scouse gone girl, a Scouse Marion Keyes, but she was such a big influence, even all the way through, you do different GCSE texts and A-level texts, and I always thought, I wonder why Marion Keyes isn't included in this. And that's another side of it I'm quite interested in, why certain things that would be deemed chick lit are not actually taught on the curriculum or not focused on in universities, more kind of looked at as a kind of, oh, that's a separate genre. So yeah, I'm really interested in that side.
Yeah, you won't find Marion Keyes shortlisted for the book or anything like that.
Oh, it should be, yeah.
It's really interesting when you think about it, what people read and what people are told they should be reading, and the kind of the values that are kind of embedded in those ideas.
Yeah, obviously I had that from the English literature degree when I first did that, and it was kind of, you given very traditional texts, but outside of that I was reading contemporary things that I thought I was reading as light relief when I wasn't. I was gaining so much experience and knowledge from everything I was reading. I think that's one of the main things. You've got to read everything. If you're a writer, you've got to read, you've got to be prepared to take criticism, as I'm sure Marion Keyes has in the past, not just with covers and things like that, but I'm sure she's been told that doesn't work. So it's really important.
Well, good luck with your career, and it'd be great to be able to say in the future that I had interviewed the Scouse Marion Keyes,
I hope
who's
so.
sold hundreds of thousands of copies.
That'd be brilliant.
Claire, thanks very much for coming in today, and we'll see you on the next edition of Arts Alive Books. Good night.